Welcome back to the Chasing Happiness podcast, an honest podcast about finding happiness, what it really means, and the process of getting there. My name is Crystal, and today I'm going to talk to someone who I'm super excited to talk about because if you listen to this podcast, you know how much I love travel, and April is all about travel. So April, for everybody who's listening who maybe doesn't know you, hasn't been to your website or on your Facebook group, why don't you let people know sort of who you are? And let's start with sort of why travel, because not everybody picks that route.
Yeah, exactly. Well, my name's April Bielefeldt, but April's fine. And I'm kind of a traveler slash photographer slash like just curious explorer is how I kind of
Ooh, I
guess is
love
the
that.
best way to put it. And I like connecting travelers with new ways to travel and with new places to go and inspiring them to travel no matter what obstacles. Because it's so easy. Oftentimes people say, oh, well, I don't have time off, or, oh, they have the idea that travel is expensive. And you know what? We are so lucky in today's world. We have so many options available to us now. I grew up in the Midwest in Iowa pre-internet. So, at that time, you couldn't always find opportunities to like go live in a lighthouse for the summer and do painting, or you couldn't do you didn't always know about house exchange or house sitting or some of these other amazing things that allow you to travel, and you don't have to be super rich to do it. In fact, it can offset your expenses.
Which is such a big thing. And I'm so glad you brought it up because so I am a huge travel enthusiast. And often people will say to me, like, how do you afford to do it? And honestly, it is getting creative in some circumstances. If you want to, for example, when I very first went to Ireland, my first overseas trip by myself, I backpacked around Ireland and I stayed in really inexpensive hostels, hotels, room shares, things like that to sort of offset the cost a little rather than, the expensive hotel in downtown Dublin. So you can get creative with it, whether you're traveling internationally or just in your own backyard. And a lot of people are just unaware that those options are available.
Right. And that's what I love. And that's why when I say traveler and curious explorer, it's like sometimes people they hear the word travel and they want to do it, but they don't realize that there's all these different ways to incorporate that into their lifestyle, into the way they're living, that it doesn't mean like, oh, I got to work for 30, 40 years and save this pot of gold. And if anything, I think that's what I want to bring to the forefront. And I don't often share this, but I think, unfortunately, my mother and I had a very close relationship, but she did that. She was from that older generation where you like work, save your money, put it aside so that you could, quote, retire and then go enjoy the travel, go enjoy that. And she never got to enjoy that. And so now it's like, that's where I was like, you know what? I got to stop this 9 to 5, like work for someone else, unless it makes sense, but balance that, find that balance again, because ultimately happiness and having that is so much more important. We none of us know how much time we have, on this special earth place. But, again, you don't want to, a lot of times we put things off. Well, if I get this, I'll be happy. Or if, when after 20 years of working, then I can be happy and enjoy that. And no, we need to change that thought process. And so that's what I want to do with my travel group, with my, just even with my website. And not that people may necessarily go with me and take my tour, but to inspire them to go find their path and share information, connect with people like yourself that backpacked around Ireland and did it staying in hostels or, little homestays or, in another person's home or something, whatever it is, let's get them out there.
Yes, because there are so many options. I'm kind of like you, I'm Canadian, but I grew up in like a farm community in Northern Ontario here in Canada. And there really wasn't, when I was younger, a whole lot of option. First of all, you had no idea how to contact people, find people before the internet, right?
Right.
So that didn't exist. And it was more difficult because you didn't really know what was out there. But now that we have access, not only can you talk to people from everywhere and find out what's in their area, what's around, what might be worth checking
Right.
out, but you now have the ability to actually communicate with people who are doing home shares, who are doing work exchange programs, things like that, that make it so much easier for you to say, you know what, I've never been to Thailand, for example. I'll go for 3 weeks and I'll feed the elephants and explore, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that. And that's what yeah, that's what I love about sharing, about the aspect of working travel in. And just as we've seen, there's starting to be a real shift in where you do your work, how you do your work.
Yes.
A lot more people have figured out they can work remotely, maybe work from a different location, take the train. I mean, nothing, if you can work remotely, get on the train. My co-host, Cindy, and took the train for 6 months last year, and she was still working,
Oh
but
my gosh.
when she was done working, she's in a new city, in a new place, and even in the United States, and she's like, oh, I can explore a new neighborhood, go check out the local, grocery store here. So travel doesn't have to be expensive.
I love that. And I love that you brought up sort of not specifically local, but like local within your country. Because I think until COVID, a lot of people, when they thought travel, they thought I have to leave the country in some way. And I think COVID, especially for people here in Canada, because we had some pretty severe lockdowns, gave people an excuse to start exploring their own backyards, their own communities,
Yes.
their own country. I know tons of people who got on the train, for example, and they went from one side of the country to the other because you had the ability to do that, but you couldn't leave the country freely. And I think it's really important, especially for people who maybe are a little hesitant to travel because they're not sure what resources, what services are available in other countries. You can get out and explore and still sort of feel like you're home, even if you're just one state over.
Right, exactly. So, so very true.
I think travel is probably one of my favorite topics, in part because I love the aspect of being able to go somewhere new, experience a new culture, talk to people, see how someone else lives, right? Like if we're never getting
Right.
outside of our own box, we don't know what the other options are. And there are so many great places around the world that just experience life completely different than we do. We just don't know about it because we're stuck here in our own little boxes.
Right, exactly. And just like I'm sure Canada too, even within the United States, one city, one area of the country. I mean, you've got Banff, you've got Seacoast up there too, mountains, and then, the middle where it's more
Yes.
flat and grasslands, more open. I think just sometimes getting outside, I think too, that's the other thing. When I tie it back to happiness, is oftentimes we're stuck in our little box in our cubicle with our computer screen, but just turn everything off and go outside and make that a different place. Get out a, I say it, but get out an old fashioned paper map, because then you can really lay it out and look at, oh wow, look how big Canada is, look how big the United States, but 60 miles, 2 hours, even for the weekend, I can go to somewhere that's completely different landscape, different little town. They have different little foods, maybe, like there's local micro types of communities and different people, and just to meet different people and how they're living, or maybe they're living on a farm, maybe they're, it's just, to me it's just eye opening. It's exciting, and that's why it's addictive.
Yes, it is addictive. And I think for most people, the ability to be able to, even if it is just as you said, for a weekend trip, to be able to feel like you've gone somewhere new, you've experienced something different, even if it is just, exploring local wineries or whatever it happens to be, depending on where you live, because it gives you not just a different sort of perspective, but it also gives you the experience of actually exploring, which we don't do very often now because we're stuck in our homes on our computers working remotely or whatever it happens
Yeah,
to be.
right.
And
And it
there's,
doesn't, I
sorry, go
think
ahead.
too, I was just saying, like getting outside and turning off the computer, because we get so used to finding our entertainment or our books now, everything on our little handheld device, that we don't realize, like, just going to a new small town, they have live music maybe, or maybe you'll walk into a little bookstore where they're having an author do a reading. So it's just opening up your mind and exploring, and maybe sometimes that too will spark something new that you didn't even imagine. You didn't think about, making pottery or, creating food or, I'm even in the sphere of travel, there's people now creating food tours or creating ghost tours, or I mean, there's just, it's
Yes.
so if you have an interest in something and you don't always maybe know what that interest is until sometimes it literally has to hit you in the face, fall in your lap, and then you're like, wow, I kind of like this because I tried it. I went to a painting and wine night and now I really like painting. I think I'm going to try that or, take that up, or maybe I want to bake, and there's so many different ways to like explore food and do it in different ways. So it's a very exciting time in a lot of ways if you're able to see past your four walls, see past your computer screen, and actually be brave and take those sometimes it's taking those baby steps. I know generally I consider myself a little bit of an introvert, so sometimes it's like, getting out to explore something new. I kind of want to find a buddy and take them with me, and so sometimes, finding that person. You can connect with people though on Facebook or in a Facebook group and ask, and usually someone else wants to give it a try too. So
Yes. And I'm so glad you brought that up because one of the best experiences I had when I backpacked across Ireland. Now, this was, just sort of as social media was unfolding, it was very brand new and
yeah.
whatever. So that wasn't really a huge thing yet. But I met people while I was backpacking who now, even though we're only connected on social media because we're in totally different countries, we can meet up if we're traveling to the same place. We can
Right.
experience the same thing. So you form new communities of people within your friend circle as well, because like-minded people want to spend more time together.
Yes, exactly. And that is so true. And that's one place where the internet has given us, again, new communities of people, depending on what your interest is, whether it's books or painting or, again, to meet up and do things in person, as well as have someone to talk to, online or, reach out to if you're not sure how to do something or how to go about something.
Absolutely. And I think it's become a great resource. One of the things you had mentioned is now people are starting to learn they can work remotely. And all of these countries are starting to open up entrepreneur visas so that people can travel and work. And that is such a sort of scary thing for people who have never done it. But there are these great communities like the one you're building on Facebook where people can get together and talk to other people who have been through the process, find out how difficult it is, what the requirements are, without having to sort of go through the scary government conversation about how do I make that work.
Yes,
And it's so
exactly.
helpful to have that. So, since we're talking about it, do you want to tell people who are listening what's the best way for them to get in touch with you and join your community?
Yeah, sure. Our Facebook group is the Travel Collective, and the website is the-travelcollective.com. And there we have community events where we just have, 2 times a month we do like a coffee chat, and we have travelers join that from Scotland and Spain and just all over the world. So again, there's another way to connect with someone through a conversation and then find out. I mean, recently one of our gentleman who's an expat and lives in Germany, he was hiring for people to come to Germany for the summer and help him lead tours. I mean,
Oh
these
my gosh.
experiences, yeah, these connections wouldn't happen, any other way, but it's just fabulous. There's a lot of people in that community, in that group. We're continuing to grow it. And again, connect people from all around the world and open up their world, give them new opportunities, whether that's people that have actually house sat, pet, do the pet sitting and, walk you through so it isn't scary. Someone's already done it and has ways to go about doing it. It's very exciting.
And for everyone listening, I, of course, will post in the show notes the links so that you can follow April. You can join the group. You can get involved. You can even just start to look for things that maybe you want to experience, whatever it happens to be. But April, I do want to ask you, because you are a fellow travel enthusiast, where's one place that you have yet to go that is on your bucket list?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. There's so many places. I think Portugal and Spain are two places I have not explored, and I've not been to Egypt or Morocco. So there's just a palette of places that I actually have not been. I've been so focused on New England is my biggest thing. When people Google my name, they'll see New England and fall foliage and fall colors come up. And I do. I've spent a lot of time out there. Chasing fall colors, very addictive, but I need to like break away and start to take time to go visit these other places. And again, these experiences, these towns, these countries that, again, very diverse, different things to do, and the world is open. You just have to find ways to go. And, it's not always the traditional save your money and go, but find an opportunity, whether that is, there's some English exchange programs that I think are very fascinating too, where they want you to come and speak English. So you don't even have to be a teacher or trained. You go, you spend a week at a school, they put you up. I think Spain, there's one of them. A friend of mine has done
Oh,
it. And
cool.
yeah, it's cool. And literally the Spaniards come and the whole week you're speaking and doing activities in English, and it's for them to improve their English skills.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Right? Isn't that amazing?
That's
So there's
such a fabulous thing because I have talked to people who want to travel, but have not wanted to do the teach English for 6 months kind of
Yeah,
thing.
right.
And that sounds like sort of that perfect in between for people to sort of dip their toes in, see whether or not they can handle that, but also be able to get out, enjoy not just whatever the culture happens to be in that
Yeah.
country, but actually meet some people, have conversations, all of that. Oh my God, that sounds fabulous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super fun. So there's that. I mean, Morocco is just so different than where I've been. In Egypt too, as a kid, I've always, like I said, I'm a curious person. I have a million different interests. And my dad said to me one day, he was like, I want to go to Egypt. And I'm like, well, let's just make it happen. So we were going to go like a year or two ago, but we're kind of waiting for the Grand Egyptian Museum to open up and figure out. Again, I always like to connect with a local or someone that's so passionate about it that they're going to introduce us to locals or do a homestay or incorporate a meal in someone's home and really see what's beyond just the things you need to see. If we go to
Yes.
Egypt, you definitely want to see the pyramids, but you want to see beyond that. Where do the locals eat? Where do they shop? I mean, we want to go see that.
Yes. And that I think is so important. And lots of people, especially when you're talking about a tourist place, lots of people only do the touristy stuff. And one of the
Right.
biggest things that I learned was it's so important to do the non touristy stuff so that you actually experience what the country is like or what the local city is like.
Yeah.
So even here in Canada, I went to the Yukon to see the Northern Lights a few years ago. And rather than, just go to the like main street with the Boston pizza and the fancy restaurants, we asked the people working at the hotel, like, where do you eat lunch? Where do you go when you need to shop? What does that look like? And yes, you had to drive a little bit further out of town and those sorts of things, but you got to experience like, I had meals I never would have eaten. I got to have authentic bannock bread. Like things like that don't happen if you're doing the sort of local touristy experience. And then you miss out on some of the cultural stories and places like one of the restaurants that we went to was a very tiny place, but the cook came out and actually sat down and talked to us while we were eating our meal because it was such a tiny place and took the time to say, like, even if you're only here for a few days, one thing you should do is go see our local government because they give tours and we do government here in this place differently than we do anywhere else in the country because the natives actually run the government there versus the federal government. So it's a little bit different how the government
Right.
structure works. I never would have known that as a Canadian if I hadn't gone out of my way to try and have a little bit of a local experience. So you do even learn things about your own country, your
Oh,
own
exactly.
places.
Right. Oh, I highly suggest that. I love that. I mean, that's exactly what I always say. I went to Alaska to see the Northern Lights and the same thing. It's like there's the parks and the regular thing, but I literally that's where I got out the map and like, let's go check out this little town. We went into the little grocery store and we started just chatting with the gentleman behind the counter. He shared how his family had owned this grocery store for years. And he pointed
Oh,
out things like, oh, well, these are what because there's things on the shelf. We're like, what is this? But then we
yes.
also, right there in the parking lot, someone came up to us and they saw that, we weren't locals, so they wanted to talk to us. And we realized this gentleman had been an Iditarod winner from like the
Oh
1970s.
my
And
gosh.
what a sweet man. But we would never have had that conversation or met that amazing person if we just stayed on the main highway and only gone to the recommended Yelp, TripAdvisor places. You have to like be willing to get off the beaten path and, like you said, go eat where the locals eat. That's my favorite question. I love that.
Yes, absolutely. I'm 100% with you. I do want to be respectful of your time. And I typically ask people a couple of questions who come on the podcast. Are you game to answer a
Yeah.
couple
Yep. I'm
questions?
game to answer them.
Awesome. Okay. So the first question is if you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be?
I think it would be follow your heart. Do what your heart tells you and work hard at that. You can choose to work hard at many different careers, but if you really follow the one that you're most passionate about, and sometimes that's hard. It's hard to find what that is. You know, when we're kids, we're like, oh, we want to do this and we want to do that. And sometimes, and it's not a wrong advice. People try to steer us one way or the other. Oh, that art degree, it's not going to do you any good. You need to
Right.
do something that's going to, you know, you got to have a solid job. You got to have, you know, pay your bills. But there's many, many people that follow their heart and know what they're capable of and know, I guess, what matters most. And that's what you have to boil it down to. Is it being comfortable with is your nest comfortable with lots of, like, a big house, lots of stuff in it, or is your comfort a smaller little apartment that maybe you share with someone else, but you're now getting to travel? Maybe you're gone and you
Yes.
work 6 months here and work somewhere else 6 months. So it's reinventing, but following your heart. So it's sometimes finding that happiness is creating your happiness and taking time to discover what truly makes you happy. I mean, I had to come full circle. I had to, like, go through some hardships and, you know, fall down a few times. And literally someone put a camera back in my hands, which is something I enjoyed as a kid, was like, you know, taking my little camera and taking pictures. And someone had to literally bring it back to my lap before I, like, realized, like, my world opened up again. Like, oh my gosh, there's no reason I can be here on a Friday afternoon, take my camera and go do something, have fun. And that's a big part of it too, is have fun. You know, make sure you're having fun. If it's not fun, you need to reevaluate.
I'm 100% with you on that. So, speaking of that, what inspires you these days?
Oh, everything I think inspires me, but I think connecting with other people and creating connections with people, opening their world, opening their eyes. I don't consider myself like the best photographer out there. I'm not aspiring to maybe be that, but if I can take someone that enjoys taking pictures with their cell phone and I can take them to a beautiful place at the right time of day and show them that their eyes see some amazing stuff, and now they're like, oh my gosh, I want to get a better camera and I want to keep doing this. And they've got that, they start to get that bug going of being creative and that they are creative, and encouraging them, you know, lifting them up. I think so many times we get beat down through life sometimes, you know, and you have to, like, keep at it. Don't listen to the naysayers. You got to keep at it. I can't say that enough. You know, too many people, oh, that's not a good drawing. Well, you know what? It might be a great drawing. You know, maybe the viewer likes fine detailed things, but the next viewer likes something really abstract.
Right.
There's something for everyone.
Yes. And I think that is so important because we do often, especially nowadays, get caught up in that little cycle of, oh, well, somebody says this isn't good enough. But the truth is, if you look at all of the greats, all of the great photographers, artists, creatives, during their time, nobody thought they were that great. It took
Exactly.
years after for people to realize the skill that that took. And you know, following their passion is ultimately what got them there. And that is such an important thing for us all, because I think you're right. Inspiration can kind of be found anywhere if we're willing to just open our eyes and see it. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
The next question is if you could have a conversation with anyone alive or dead, who would it be and why?
Ooh, that's a tough one. There's multiple people I'd like to have a conversation with. Everyone from Amelia Earhart to Van Gogh. I mean,
Oh,
two totally very different people, but I think Van Gogh embodies that message of, at the time he was creating, he fell into such deep, dark places. I mean, and many of us have now seen some of the movies and things. I mean, he just, you know, hit that bottom where, he didn't want to continue being on this place. And yet years later, look at how many people flock to these interactive, immersive Van Gogh experiences. And I hope in the heavens somewhere, he knows how many people's lives he touched, how many
Yes.
maybe aspiring young artists, brewing artists, he opened their eyes to like keep at it and just keep going. And Amelia Earhart, I mean, what kind of bravery? You start flying around the world, and to this day, we don't even know what happened to the poor woman. But again, she broke a lot of barriers. She had a lot of support along the way. There were other female pilots during her time. For whatever reason, people surrounded her and lifted her up. But again, what kind of end did she meet? There's all those mysteries. But again, she followed that passion. She never gave up. She never quit looking for that next level. What do I need to do? How do I need to frame this? How do I need to promote myself? How do I need to sell myself? And, to some extent, Van Gogh kept going as long as he could. But again, it's that sometimes you just have to shut out the naysayers and just continue your path.
Yes, because ultimately you've mentioned two people who may not have thought they were inspiring many people at the time, but look at how many people have been inspired by their stories and their journeys since then. It's so important because you never know.
No, you don't. And that's just it. Even you or I, we don't know if a conversation, a word we say, going to them. I always say this to people too, like, if you're having a bad day, just try to take yourself out of your own stuff. And if you go to the market, even commenting on something for the cashier, even smiling, a simple smile. Yes. If you're in an aisle and you're both with another shopper, I mean, just say something pleasant or even a smile. It's amazing what it does to, like, if you're forced to try to smile or get out of where you're at and what you're having to deal with, but to say something pleasant to someone like, oh, wow, I really like the shirt you're wearing. You never know. That might have been the one thing that person needed to hear that day. And it puts a little lift in your step. I know even for me, it's like, if someone says, hey, I like your hair, that's really cool. And I know I did it myself and it's like just a hodgepodge or whatever. I go out of the market like, yeah.
Yes.
It's good, it's like, you're feeling good. We all need that. And there's such a lack of that in today's world. It's so hard. I think that's what a lot of this has come down to. I worry about all of the younger people, but they do have just this social media and they're not always given good skills to interact face to face, and we need to somehow lift them up. And
yeah, absolutely. And, I love that you bring this up because I was talking to someone the other day and we were having a conversation about, some of the differences, even just between the United States and Canada. And one of the conversations that we had within that conversation was like, as a Canadian, if you take public transportation, when you get off the bus, you always say thank you to the driver. That's just something that naturally happens here in Canada. Yeah. And my American friend was shocked. And because I'm Canadian, that seemed very normal to me until someone pointed out to me, around the world, other people don't necessarily yell thank you to the driver when they get off a bus, a public transportation train, something like that. And it's just this reminder of taking the moment to just be a little human with someone else, because you never know who needs that thank you.
Right. Oh, that's huge. I know, right there, and there are different customs. I mean, when I grew up in the Midwest, you didn't always know who was driving past you on the road, but you waved at them, and it felt like, again, like, oh wow, they know who I am. And I think I try to carry that through, and I think it's like, again, if we can just kind of pass the spark and just it's the smallest things. I tell you, it's like, it's not the big, like, you don't always have to. It's not the big show of like buying someone a huge present. It's often just the everyday of checking in or saying hello to the person or, excuse me, thank you. It hurts that we've gotten away from some of these just niceties because we're scared of what, how these words will be interpreted, but we need to go back to a little bit of the niceties, I don't know,
I 100% agree with you. It's interesting because I have recently moved from Ontario to Halifax, Nova Scotia. which really is not that far, but it's kind of halfway across the country.
It is far.
And and realistically, it's like a whole different planet because Ontario is sort of the biggest province and it's the most people. It's a melting pot of people from everywhere around the world. And it's very busy, very hustle and bustle. So, in some ways, it's gotten away from those little small moments that we're talking about. But out here, everybody smiles at everybody. If you drive down the street and somebody's walking down the side of the road, everybody waves like you were talking about in the Midwest. And so it's a different kind of community. And it makes you feel different as a human being because even if you're in the elevator with someone and they just say, have a good day, you suddenly start to smile and have a better day.
Right. Right. It is so true. And I hope that it's something I know a lot of people are, our big cities in the United States are having a lot of issues on multiple levels. But I think that is what's pushing people out and back to some of these smaller communities because that's what people want. People realize that even if they tend to be introverted, there is a point where you do need to be out and interact. And you need to be, if you give, that smile, it's returned to you 100-fold. And you just, because oftentimes you see the person's face light up. You see the cashier, like, it just, they feel better. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a market lately where unfortunately the person, two people ahead, they're having a disagreement. Someone's yelling at the poor cashier. The price is wrong. The computer did something. It's like, whew, just breathe, everyone.
Right.
And like,
Yeah, so important. Okay, I do want to be respectful. So the very last question is, what does happiness mean to you?
Happiness means creating and finding your own happiness, I guess. And it means, having interests, I think, is a big part of that. And, ooh, that's a tough one. Happiness is just a feeling of well-being. And I think that can be a challenge. I was thinking about it before we got on. And oftentimes there's things we can't control. I often say when I'm out photographing, I use it as an example, like if you're cold and your feet are cold, immediately your body takes over. And all you can think about is, I'm cold. Why are we out here? I don't really see the lighthouse. I could care less about the lighthouse because I am cold. And your body has taken over. If you're sick, things like that are out of our control. But if we can try to fix those and, find a warm blanket, get some warm clothes on, now your brain, your mind can open up and see the beauty, see the lighthouse. You'll want to stay out there longer. So happiness is a combination. It's of finding and meeting your basic needs. And then it opens you up to really explore happiness and be able to obtain it. And by basic needs, yes, if you feel like you're not able to pay your bills, you're not going to, that is not a happy place. So reaching out and getting those resources and being comfortable asking for help is oftentimes where that is. With my father-in-law that, he hit on hard times, and had he just told us what was going on, so many people would have jumped in, and that would have solved a lot of that. Because without happiness, it's like the legs on a table. Your health is going to suffer, everything's going to start to get tilted. So it's all kind of a balance. So again, it's taking care of the basic needs. And for us women, I think too, I can think back to many times, if you're not eating right, if you're not getting enough sleep, I mean, there's so many things that can impact our mental health, which can impact our happiness. So really it's taking time and knowing when to say no. Happiness doesn't mean that you're always the giver. You're always like feeling like everything's flowing out. Right now, my Cindy and I, we have a lot we're building. We're building the Facebook group, and we have a web page, and we have a podcast, and we have a YouTube channel. And we hit this wall recently, interestingly enough, where I could just tell we were both, it wasn't making us happy. We'd kind of hit this wall. And like I explained it to her, it's like my well had dried out. Everything was going out and we weren't refilling it. So we kind of had to take a pause and just go back to like the basics, like why are we doing this? And what can we do to ensure that we still are enjoying it? Because if we're not enjoying it, then it's, again, it's work. We're not making
Yes.
money on these things. We're not making money on our website. We're doing it out of our passion. But if our passion is getting squashed, then we need to refine our happiness. We need to rethink this and look at it. It's kind of like a job too. I know oftentimes we get stuck in like, oh, I can't quit this job because I need to feed my family. I need to do this. But you've got to, I implore people to take time and communicate. Tell your partner, your spouse, your family, your best friend, start talking through like, I don't like this. How can I fix it? Because having
Right.
those conversations and being honest, because sometimes honestly, you can't see how to fix the basic things that are broken. You don't know where to find the jacket to make you feel warm. You don't know how to find a way to have a paycheck. And there's probably opportunities that might be right around you. I know I hit a point where I was working, and I did. I felt very unhappy. I kind of hit a low. And it wasn't until, like I said, someone literally handed me a camera and said, "Hey, I know you used to like photography." And I was like, I kind of, yeah, and then it like my eyes opened, or they're like, well, why don't you try this or try that? And it's like in one of those suggestions, my world was open back up. And now, even though I was working, doing something I maybe didn't enjoy as much on my off time, I would look forward to that off time because it's like,
Sure.
cool, I can go walk down the sidewalk and look for flowers to photograph, or I'm going to get outside and watch the clouds and photograph them, or, I'm going to look for little patterns, and it seems so basic, but it really, for some people, once you hit that wall where you're not happy, oftentimes we can't see our way out, and you need to find that lifeline. I can't stress that enough, and sometimes that
Yes.
means being honest and being okay that there's a lot of other people like you in the same situation. But if you don't say something, I mean, please talk to someone, even if it's a message, a text, an email, go online and just say, you know what, I am stuck, I am unhappy, things aren't going well, help. Someone will respond. And it may be the most unexpected place, it may be the most unexpected way. And that's what I say about happiness too. Sometimes we think we're looking for it, we're chasing it, we're trying to find it, when in fact it might be right in front of us and we're just not able to see it.
Yes.
So it's a combination of things. So I know that was a lot.
That's okay. I absolutely love that answer because I think you're right. It is a combination of things. And sometimes, especially when you're struggling, it can be hard to see outside of the fog. But
Yeah.
if you are able to, and if you are willing to have someone, even if it's just one person,
Yes.
to be able to say, I can't see past this, they have the ability, like your friend with the camera, they have the ability to give you something else to focus on. And that helps clear the fog a little, helps to open up your world and give you different experiences because not everybody is going to live the like, I'm selling everything I own and moving across the country life. And that's
No, right.
okay because we don't all have to do it the same way. If you work a 9 to 5 job that just pays your bills, but then on the weekends you do the thing that you're passionate about, that's okay.
Right. And that's the balance that you probably need. I mean, for me, for a long time, that was the balance I needed. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm excited and I'm happy. And now I can go back to that job that I was thinking about quitting and realize you're reinvigorated because you see things differently. I could go back and be excited because it's like, okay, cool. I'm going to get off at 5 and the sun sets at 6:30. I can, on my way home, I'm going to pull over, get my camera out and take some pictures. I mean, sometimes that's, like I said, it's the simplest things, or I'm going to rearrange my schedule so that I can take my days off in October and then save up, whatever it takes. But it's finding that balance and finding your happiness and creating it. A lot of times it's in there. It's just finding it and pulling it out and creating it because you don't always, as you get older, our society, for most of us now, and hopefully younger people now have more open doors so they can see there's more options, but you're on this treadmill, you're on this like treadmill of like, okay, the normal, I got to get a 9 to 5, I got to cover this.
Yes.
And yes, you do have to do that, but there's so many different ways now to do that and make sure that you're happy, because without happiness, you're not going to, none of it else matters, it really,
Yes.
why
It's
are
so
we here
true.
if we're not enjoying it? It's it's hard for me when I encounter people and I meet them and they're not happy, and yet they have every reason to be happy. They're comfortable. They have a comfortable space. They're fed. They have warm clothes. They live. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, there are probably places still in the United States. There's still pockets, and in Canada too, where it's like there's poverty. But for the most part, in the scheme of things, to be in this northern hemisphere, we're not in a war zone. We're not worried
Right.
that, the drug cartel hopefully isn't going to come through our house. I mean, hopefully we're not in those situations. And I really hope that those people that are looking for ways out, and people that are working with those individuals. I know it's a hard thing, but there's so many people that sadly don't have those things to be concerning them. And yet they're still desperately unhappy. I mean, which is why there's so many counselors and there's so many other ways people are looking to try to buy happiness. And happiness isn't something you can buy. You really have to create it and find it. And it's there. You have to like pull it out.
Yes. And explore to figure out what it is for you, because it's so different for everyone. And I think we live in this society that is trying to tell everyone, well, in order to be happy, you need to do this and then this and then this. And what happens, or at least what happened in my personal experience, was you do all of those things. And then you wake up one morning and you go, I'm not happy. This doesn't work for me. And you have to sort of go back and figure it out for yourself. So the sooner you can do that, even if it means living outside the box in some ways, then the sooner you do find what that happiness is, knowing that, as you said, your basic needs are met, you're comfortable, you have the ability to explore what those options look like.
Yeah, I know that is so, so true. And there is no right path. There's so many different paths. And I think that's what's important to take away too, is you hear about, unfortunately, like celebrities, we only see this on the outside. You see that they're like Robin Williams, really amazing comedian, made many of us happy. We enjoyed going to his movies and laughing. Who knew behind that how unhappy he was?
Right.
So you can't, again, it's never assume what you see is what's really behind that. When you go into the market, you get off a bus, you don't know what happened before that person is there. So by your little action, you might, a kind word or, whatever it might be, even taking time to listen. If someone reaches out to you, try to make that time to listen, and honestly listen, because oftentimes we get so caught up on thinking, what's the next thing I can contribute to this? How can I, we're in this society now of like, how can I angle this my way? But no, sometimes honestly, the best thing you can give someone is the space and time to just listen and let the other person share and then respond. And sometimes they don't want to respond. They honestly just need a sounding board. They just need someone to listen.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, April, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Crystal. It was a lot of fun. And hopefully we inspired people to really go out and get outside to, get some fresh air. I think that can do wonders for you, and explore, have fun experimenting, try different things. Don't ever let something stop you from dabbling, because you never know where that amazing next interest may take you.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure we have. So for everyone listening, of course, I will post in the show notes all of the links so that you can follow April, you can get involved, you can start to explore as well. And if you know someone who you think might be inspired by this conversation, please share this podcast with them as well. I thank you guys for listening. I cannot believe 7 years into this podcast, you keep coming back week after week, and I get to have these amazing conversations with people like April. So thank you for that. I hope you guys have an absolutely amazing week, and we will chat with you next week. Bye for now.